Welcome to Bookworthy. On today's Season 5 bonus episode, we're talking with award-winning author Tricia Goyer. Tricia has written over 30 books, from Amish and historical fiction to speculative fiction, with her oldest son, Nathan. Now Tricia has teamed up with marine biologist Sherry Sigelson in Wonders of the Ocean Realm, a book for ages 8 to 12. Journeys through 5 captivating short stories where readers explore an ocean creature's life cycle, habits, and environment. Plus, enjoy fascinating scientific truths about God's incredible underwater world. Welcome to Bookworthy, Tricia.
Thank you, Valerie. It's so great to be here.
It is great to have you here. Now, to start us off, marine creatures. So you kind of can guess where I'm going to go with the random question of the week. So what is your favorite marine creature and why?
Oh, I love dolphins. I think that would be my favorite. And actually, when I was researching with my co-author, Sherry, in Florida last year, we were staying at this hotel, had like an inlet to the ocean, and this many pods of dolphins came with their little babies. It was like the sweetest thing. We had the best time. And so it's so fun. When you write about ocean books, you get to go to the ocean and see cool things like dolphin mothers and babies.
My husband often asks me, are we researching Ireland because you want a trip there? I'm like, maybe.
I know, exactly, yes.
So that's definitely a fun part, because research has to be hands-on, for sure.
Yeah.
So fun. Tricia, why don't you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah, so I actually met Sherry at a homeschool moms retreat. So Sherry and I both speak at homeschool conferences. And so I've seen her before, like passing, like as we're each going to our workshops to talk. And then at this retreat, we had time to actually sit through each other's like little talks because everyone was in every session. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, I love her. I love her energy. I love the way she shares science. And I talked to her afterwards. I'm like, we have to write a book together. Now, she already does curriculum for a lot of different companies, science curriculum. And so I'm more story-based. And she goes, oh, I have an idea. I've been wanting to write science stories because kids sit down and science is always facts. Like, we're going to learn about this and that and these facts. But what if we wove stories around some amazing marine animals? And so that's what we did. And we just had the best time researching together, picking the animals, coming up with interesting facts. And it was awesome for me talking about research. She's a marine biologist. So I would say, Sherry, insert facts here about this creature. And so she did all that. And I would do the kind of wordsmithing, making the story sound good. And you actually had to follow a story arc, which was interesting with our sea creatures. And so that was super fun.
Very neat. I love how you kind of, what is it, 6 characters or is it 5?
5, yeah.
5 characters. So the sea star, a peacock mantis, shrimp, a mimic octopus, a humpback whale, and a deep sea anglerfish. There's a whole host of creatures. What kind of made you guys pick these particular creatures?
We picked ones that maybe kids hadn't known very much or heard about before, like the peacock mantis shrimp. It is like its punch is like the speed of light. And it's a rainbow of colors, and it's just so unique. It looks kind of like a little crabbish, more like a little lobster with a little tail, but then it's a shrimp. It was just this mix of characteristics. And so that just stood out as something that's really unique that kids might not have heard of. And then we thought of what kids love, like whales and then octopuses. Kids love them. But Dexter is one that mimics other creatures. So he actually will turn into shapes of other fish or ocean creatures. And so he's super fun. So we kind of would toss them around and figure out which ones were most interesting. And those are the ones we kind of stuck with.
I love that. Now, how does your experience as a homeschool parent have impacted the vision that you have for Wonders of the Ocean Realm?
Well, as a homeschool mom, we have 10 kids. And so our oldest now, I'm really old. My oldest now is 35. Our youngest is 14. So I've been homeschooling for a while. But I love reading out loud. And so I just love, sitting back with a book, and the kids gathered around. One time, at the most, I had 7 kids, kind of around the kitchen table, because there was coming and going with some older ones and new ones coming in. And I just love like telling a story. And so as a homeschool mom, that was my favorite. But then when it came to science, it seems like a lot of it was more dry. And so my love of just telling a story and reading it aloud to my kids mixed with they can learn in the process kind of came together in this book.
Very neat. We do that in our own home. We have audio adventures that we listen to in our car, and a lot of them do kind of mix that science and faith element that I just love. And I think one of the sea creatures that I've been fascinated with recently is called a sea angel.
Oh,
it is like a little bitty sea slug.
Okay.
But they are bioluminescent, and they, of course, they're carnivorous, which I didn't know. I was like, oh, that's not quite so beautiful, but okay.
Yeah.
But it was just an odd creature that me and my kids had a great time just digging into and like, okay, what is this? What does it look like? Where do they live? And just, I think story does a great job of introducing our kids to new things. They're like, I hadn't thought of that before. And I love how you kind of mix those two joys together, both fact and fiction, to just inspire kids to want to know more about the ocean world. Now, how do you feel like the illustrations and the photography impact the tone of the book?
So we had so much fun deciding on illustrators. So we were presented with 3 options, and they were so beautiful. Like all 3 of them, I was looking at them like, how are we ever going to decide? But what we like about our illustrator that we chose is that we can see personality in the sea creatures. The other ones were gorgeous, but they just looked like creatures. I mean, they just like you would see in an encyclopedia. And so I love in some of Vlad's illustrations that you can actually see almost personality in their faces. And so that's really what made us choose him, because not only is they're beautifully done and they're accurate, the colors and the scale, everything is accurate, but that little hint of personality really made us drawn to that, and we love it. And I think that's what kids will love too, that they can look at the book and they're going to feel like they are kind of going on a journey with each of these creatures. And so that's really fun.
Very cool. Now, why do you feel it's important for our kids to learn about how science and faith relate to one another?
Oh, this is so cool, because when I was growing up, I was one of those kids that we went to, church on Sunday when my mom became a Christian when I was in like the 2nd or 3rd grade. And so it was kind of a new thing. And I'd hear all these stories and Bible verses and God created the world. And then you go to school and it's like, these are the facts. And it was different. And so I had a really hard time, like, this sounds wonderful, but my teacher says this. And so when my husband and I got married, our first year of marriage, we ended up going to a creation conference where it was for adults, like not kids learning science, but adults and learning about God's creation and how it actually, everything that the Bible says, we see it reflected in nature. And I just remember that was such a life-giving, faith-building step for me, where it's like, okay, this makes sense. And I love that I can totally believe the Bible, but everything that the Bible says, we just see it reflected in science, and my faith grew. Now, this is also aging myself. We bought all the VHS tapes that went from that conference, and we would have people over and we would show them these VHS tapes because we were just so just excited about that. And so now, all these years later, being able to weave in God's creation into nature and teach kids about science and look at how intricate these animals are. Look at how amazing these characteristics that God gave them. And it just is reflecting his glory. And I know that came back to that first year of that marriage when we were learning about that ourselves and how it totally matches up the Bible and science.
It is very amazing. I've taken some classes with the Institute of Creation Research, and it's just amazing to look at science through a faith lens and be like, wow, this really does make sense. It's one of those, when we give our kids the opportunity to see God, not just on Sunday, but see him throughout their day, throughout everything, how God is a part of all of that. And I think it really opens their eyes and their hearts to see God in more places than just on Sundays. So I love that about what science and what faith is doing nowadays to encourage a love of science rather than science is evil and faith is this.
Yeah. And what I love too is that Sherry, she teaches curriculum for marine biology and stuff for homeschoolers. And so after I met her, we went and got the curriculum. And so my high school or junior hires at the time were doing her curriculum. And so I'd hear her voice all day long. But then it was like I was learning along too. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's amazing. And then we got to go on and write this book together. So it's so fun when you find someone that just teaches it well and can explain it well and connect it with God's creation. It was like, wait, replay that. What did she just say in that video? They're like, Mom, it's my homework. I'm like, I know, but I really like hearing about that. It's just so faith building.
Most definitely. Now, I think every kid kind of goes through this stage. Now, did you ever have a marine biologist stage in I want to grow up and be a marine biologist?
I did not, but I have had some of my kids that have, and they're not marine biologists. But I've always wanted to be a school teacher. So since the time I was probably like third grade, I just wanted to be a school teacher, which again, I like all teaching and learning type of thing, but I never thought I would be a marine biologist. I just thought I would just go to school every day and teach a classroom. I went into third grade because I'm like, third grade, they still think you're awesome. You could do read out louds, but they're also growing in their knowledge of reading and stuff. So that's what I wanted to. But then I just homeschooled. And so I got to teach them all at all ages.
You did. And you get to teach them from the beginning to the end. And so
yes,
definitely filled that goal of your third grade self. So very neat. It's what was it? When I was growing up, I might age myself here, the movie Free Willy came out.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a very strong marine biologist vibe that was going after watching that movie. And I think, what was it? We watched as a family, Dolphin's Tale.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And my youngest wants to be an oceanographer right now. So we're kind of that's an interesting choice. I don't know what that is, or what they do, but okay.
Yeah. And then to know that people really do this, Sherry has done this. She's lived on islands and studied things. And wow, real people do these things. And so it is really cool to be able to know that can be a career that people can pursue.
Very true. Now, what do you hope young readers will take away from Wonders of the Ocean Realm?
I think mostly that they will see that God's creative hand is on everything, and that, just because we can't see him, he's still involved. He's involved in creating these creatures, but also involved in their personal lives. So after each of these stories, we have kind of a devotional aspect or some takeaway for them to think about. How is God, how has he uniquely gifted you? Or what unique traits do you have that you can use to glorify him, just like this sea creature did? And so really, of course, we want them to learn about science, but also to realize that they are uniquely created for a purpose and God designed them for a reason. Because kids often, there's always so many comparisons. I mean, as a mom of 10 kids, it's this person's tall, or this person's better at basketball, or how come she has blonde hair and I don't? I mean, there's all those comparisons. And so by sharing unique creatures and then tying it around at the end of the story, it's what about you? How did God create you? They can see that they were created for a purpose. They may not look like someone else, but they have unique gifts that God needs for his kingdom. And so that's really my hope when they walk away from reading these stories.
I love that about the 5 creatures, that they aren't the dolphin, the starfish, and sea star, but close, but not quite. Yeah. But it's just one of those, not the conventional ocean creatures. They are very different and very unique. And I love that you walk through their life stages, kind of as they grow, and they not just grow in shape and form, but they grow in what they know about themselves. And it's just the same journey that our kids, especially 8 to 12, that are going through. It's kind of that, I don't know, crucible of a time of discovering oneself. And I love that this book explores just their curiosity, as well as helping them see that we may not all look the same. We may not all, be the friendly dolphin that's so happy and popping everywhere. We can sometimes be the anglerfish down in the deep doing our thing.
And if you see a photo of what fish really look like, they are scary looking creatures. But what we loved is bringing out is they have that little lure thing on their head, the little, I don't know what you call, forgot what it was called from the book, but they have bacteria that live in there that make it glow. And they have to the bacteria only live with that fish, and that fish need the bacteria to draw other creatures in. So they need this relationship, and so it talks about friendship and stuff. So even with this creature that when you look it up and say, wow, that is an ugly fucking fish.
How can we learn about a wonderful
strange
God with this one?
Yeah, exactly. But it has to work together with that bacteria, and that's the only place on Earth that specific bacteria is found is with that fish. That's the only way it can survive is with the fish, and the only way the fish can survive is with the bacteria. And so again, it's those sciencey things that you're like, okay, this is amazing, but how are we going to relate it to kids? Well, let's talk about relationships. Like, God, we can't live alone. Like, we have to interact with other people. And so that was fun.
I love how you've drawn, not just about bringing, joy to knowing about oneself, but also that sense of community, because I think a lot of the times it's our own hearts that we're told a lot in our American culture that we got to do this on our own. Only we can do this. Pull up your bootstraps. Do it. Only you can create success. It's like, well, no, but there's so much more than just me. There's, my family and how I can impact my family with my gifts, how I can impact my neighborhood, my school, my church. It's one of those, when we start looking outside of ourselves, we do see the beauty of a relationship and how we can serve one another so well. And creation does an amazing job of showing that to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, how can parents encourage the curiosity of their science-minded children, do you think?
I think sometimes we get tired of kids asking questions, but it's one thing we can encourage them is just to ask questions. And why does this happen? Or what about these animals? And I always, whether you're a homeschooling parent or not a homeschooling parent, like when those questions come up, just say, well, let's look into it. Let's find that out. And so I always call them rabbit trails, but those rabbit trails, the more we take kids down rabbit trails, then they learn to do that on their own. And then they'll start looking, at books, and they want to research things, or we can go to the library and check out books. It's like there is a world out there that they can explore. And when we take time to read them stories, let them ask questions and then explore together and go down these rabbit trails, it teaches them to be curious. And that's so fun about having adult kids now. So like my oldest, I mentioned, just turned 14. My oldest is 35. And so when he gets together with his siblings that are his age, 35 and 32 and 30, they'll say, oh, I found out this and I discovered this. And did you know about this? And I just sit back as a homeschool mom and like, okay, they're curious about life and they learn how to do things and they try new things. And I think in life, even though it's sometimes hard, like you're like, I really just want to go take a nap. I will help you by answering questions. If we encourage them to be curious and help them find answers in right places, like the Institute of Creation Research has an amazing section where you can look up questions about different things, or other places that have, faith-based science information. It's great to see them grow and learn and explore and become curious about lots of things in life.
Very true. And I love those little rabbit trails because you're not just exploring information, you're also exploring how each other operate, how your kids work, how they see the world. And that is just, mind-blowing. And as a parent, just to be like, wow, you are a little person. You're not just, my 10-year-old, you're like, have some really big thoughts in there. And so we just kind of get lost in the everyday sometimes. And I love those rabbit trails that kind of allow us to go, all right, let's think about that. What do you think about that? And sometimes it's humorous and sometimes it's awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
It's just,
and I think also seeing them, like I used to think they were like empty vessels and we just have to like fill them up, and then just realizing like they learn in different ways. They see things differently. They ask questions differently. And then see how God uses that in the future as they grow into adults. I'm like, oh my goodness, you would drive me crazy because you'd always question these things. But then that's the child that moves to Europe and learns to live in a different culture and speak a different language because she would ask questions all the time. And we got her lots of books and she was curious about learning. And so it's amazing to see when they're little. First of all, they have all these different personalities and ways of learning. But then as they get older, you're like, oh, that's why God created you this way, for these purposes, for these people he wants you to impact for his kingdom. So it's fun to see that. It's hard at times when you're like, just listen to me, or why do you have to have another question, or why do you have to do whatever this way, why did you break that thing? Well, they wanted to see how it worked, and so they can rebuild it. It's all these things when they're little you're like, oh, and then later you're like, oh, okay. That's the reason why.
It's very true. I say often that I have 3 boys, and they are strong-willed, opinionated, and a force to be reckoned with. And when they leave my home, they will be great members of society.
That's right. My mother-in-law.
If they survive.
Yes, my mother-in-law, because this daughter I keep talking about, this my second oldest, so strong-willed. She would question everything. I would have to explain everything, and it's like long explanations. You can just say, where does the food go? You can just say in your stomach. You had to explain the digestive system when she's like 4. All these kinds of things, and so strong-willed. My mother-in-law told me that my husband had been like that, and she said, but when you set them in the right direction with that strong will, they will be strong will for life, like in the right way. And it was so true. Like, she never got swayed to do the wrong things in high school. Like, she believed in God. She's, sharing God on the other side of the world right now. So it is hard, but you're exactly right with those boys. When they're going to be adults, and they're going to be awesome. Like, they're going to be leaders and all the things. When they're little, you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with this?
It's like, how many more years do I have with them?
Yeah.
But okay. And so I love that the personalities that he places in us both shape us as parents and sanctify us a little bit.
Exactly.
Too fun. Well, Tricia, what can we expect next from you?
Oh, so speaking of these grown kids, third oldest, I have to think what child is my third oldest. We have our first book, Breath of Bones. We released this last June, and our next one is releasing next June. And we just finished edits last night. So that's kind of like looking ahead, but it's steampunk, World War II fantasy. So you could check out Breath of Bones now, knowing book 2 is coming. And that's been a fun thing too with my son, who, again, he loves storytelling. He loved writing. Even when he's little, I have little books that he made, and just seeing now, like, I can co-write with him. And as an author, I will I think this should happen. And he's like, well, what if we did this? I'm like, that's such a better plot idea than I had even come up with. And so it's fun, again, when they grow, seeing how God uniquely gifted them. So the second, we can't give the title yet, but the second book in my World War II steampunk will be out next year. And that's one of the things I'm working on.
Very exciting. It was fun to read through that and to see a different side of you in the story, and a little bit of Nathan in there too. So very fun. Where can people find out more about you and your books, Tricia?
Yeah, my website is just triciagoyer.com, and Tricia's Tricia, and triciagoyer.com, and people can go there, and all the information is there.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have those links in the descriptions. Thank you for joining me today, Tricia.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining Tricia and me on this bonus episode of the Bookworthy podcast. Check the show notes for any books or links we discussed, and in the comments, let us know what your favorite marine creature is. Be sure to like and subscribe so we can discover more great books together. Happy reading!